Take it away, Kevin.
Thanks, Nina, and thanks everybody for being here. It's great to be back for another AIM webinar, this time with our friends from IBM talking about moving content management to the cloud. And around the world, enterprise organizations from all industries are getting mandates from top management. It's time to move your enterprise IT to the cloud. As a result, cloud adoption is soaring. Worldwide end user spending on cloud services is forecasted to grow to nearly $600 billion in 2023, according to the latest forecast from Gartner. Worldwide cloud infrastructure services spending increased about 20% to over $66 billion in Q1 of this year alone. But what about content and content services specifically? IDC predicts that content management in the cloud deployments will double within the next 2 years. So moving content management to the cloud is a timely and important subject for us today. But here's the deal. It's one thing for startups or smaller organizations to jump into the cloud. Indeed, these smaller organizations are perhaps best positioned to take advantage of the cloud. And yet it's quite yet another thing altogether for existing enterprise organizations moving content to the cloud, organizations that have petabytes and petabytes of data stored on premises and perhaps hundreds of applications deployed. For these legacy organizations, moving content to the cloud is a daunting task that is full of risk. So what are some best practices when moving content to the cloud, especially for enterprise organizations? Well, that's what we'll be exploring in today's webinar with our guests from IBM. We'll look at the complexities of cloud migration with real-world examples from IBM customers who have successfully made the transition. We'll learn how to perform an analysis of your organization's IT infrastructure, ways to determine what is cloud ready and what should remain on premises, techniques to maximize storage and transactional costs, and strategies to ensure that you gain all of the available benefits from content management in the cloud. So it should be a great session today, but before I introduce our guest today, I do want to say that we want to hear from you too. If you have a question for our guests today, please enter them into the Q&A feature. That's where I'll be looking for questions, and we'll have some time later in the later part of our program today for your questions. So let's bring on our guests today, starting with Lauren Mays. Lauren, are you with us? Hello, Lauren. Welcome aboard. Lauren Mays is Program Director for Content and Capture for IBM Business Automation Software. Thank you for joining us, Lauren. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Southern California. I live in
Nice. I wish I was there right now. All right. And also with us is Eric Leeson. He'll be joining in support for questions and advice as needed. Eric is the worldwide practice leader for business automation at IBM Technology Expert Labs. Eric, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from? Hello, Eric. We are not hearing you,
Hello.
Eric.
Sorry.
There you are.
I am in beautiful Salt Lake City, looking at the mountains.
Nice. Salt Lake City. I was born in Salt Lake City so many years ago. Welcome aboard, Eric and Lauren. Thank you for being part of our event, or being guests on our event today. Now, Lauren, tell us more about your perspectives and where IBM is heading in terms of moving content management to the cloud.
Sure. So, what we're seeing is that, exactly what you mentioned. Many of our customers are looking to move to the cloud. And that can mean multiple things. It could mean that they want to move to SaaS, or it could mean they just want to move and manage their own systems in the cloud. And so we have customers doing both, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today.
All right, very good. Well, I know you have some slides that you'd like to share with us today, so please feel free to go ahead and take over, and let's see.
Great. Okay. Assume you can see that. Okay, so
looks great, Lauren. Thank you.
Looks good. Okay, perfect.
Yes, indeed.
All right, so Kevin already provided some statistics. So this is the IDC one that talks about 45.5% of public cloud deployments will increase from 23.2. But what I wanted to call out on this particular statistic is we are talking about enterprise content management applications. IDC actually separates like content sharing and collaboration applications, file shares, or cloud-based file shares and sharing from ECM or enterprise content management applications. And those are two very different things because with ECM applications, it often has many integrations into your applications. So highly connected into your business environment, your critical business environment. So just wanted to call that out, as we're not just talking about, standing up a cloud file share. Okay, so why, what's driving our customers to the cloud? So what are we seeing? The key things that we see are there's a limited number of IT resources who can manage the cloud or manage the systems that they have in place today. There's a need for more rapid deployment. We see in many cases where our clients take a really long time to upgrade, and that's usually because the length of time and the cost and the resources requiring to do those upgrades is limited. And so if you can get, especially into SaaS, you can really do much more rapid updates. Cost reduction is another key driver we see. Being able to have some level of elastic scalability if you're using some of those technologies in the cloud. And of course, the final three are security, reliability, and availability. It's difficult to keep up with these things in your own environments. And so with assistance from vendors and SaaS offerings and things that already account for these things, you can be in a much better position when moving to cloud. So, what kind of cloud are we really talking about? I alluded to this in the beginning, but we have multiple cloud options. You may have a private cloud where your company is moving or has infrastructure in your own data centers. You may be using cloud patterns, in order to improve how you manage those. And of course, there's public cloud. You may want to be able to put your data in IBM Cloud, AWS, Azure. But by far, what we see as the largest segment of customers are in the category of hybrid. They have some things in private, they have some elements in public cloud. And so that's really one of the areas, that IBM, who supports, many of our enterprise customers, where they are is hybrid. I have a fun little analogy or metaphor here, of pizza to the cloud. So there's 4 ways you can enjoy pizza. You can make it at home where you provide everything from where to eat it, the oven, to all the ingredients. Or you could buy it already made and bring it home where you still provide the location and the firepower, and then you just need to eat it. You can have pizza delivered. So again, you're just providing the place to eat it. And then finally, you can dine out, right? Where you don't do anything but walk in the door and eat the pizza. And so this really is being compared to cloud computing. So on the left, you have traditional on-premises where, again, you're doing everything. You can start using resources in the cloud, such as, servers, virtualization technology, networking, storage. You can start using services in the cloud. So things like middleware, database as a service, content management as a service, which starts to get you over into this category where most everything you run, is or I shouldn't say that. It's really the services you're using are all collected into a single service. Again, to the comment I had about hybrid being a very common pattern for our customers, you may have many of these software as a service and then some that you run more as platform as a service. And so what is really driving the implementation or people to really start looking at this now? So what's driving the cloud deployments? Cloud mandates are very common, right? Your CIO or CTO says we must go to cloud. That's typically driven by a desire to reduce costs. The other big driver is you don't have enough resources. It's very difficult in some cases to get people who are skilled enough to maintain these systems. And some of these systems are aging systems that have fewer and fewer people available for them. The next one is the one I already mentioned. We're running really old versions and it takes too long to upgrade, so we're just going to stay where we're at. This obviously means you can't take advantage of new features and new capabilities that will help your business. But it also means you're now prone to security issues that are so prevalent today. And finally, the other one that we see as a big driver, and it'll be in the examples we show here, is the desire to take multiple ECM systems and consolidate. So, through acquisitions or just consolidation within your own organization, many customers have multiple of these systems. And it's not just ECM systems. They also may have, data sitting in other applications, files sitting in other applications that really ought to be consolidated and managed, because it's critical business content, within their content management system instead of sitting in these applications. So, with all that, where do you start? We get a lot of questions in our communities, our user groups, within our sales organizations. Well, okay, I need to do this. What do I do? How do I get going? And I just want to cover a couple of different patterns that we see clients adopt. So there's the first one here is lift and shift. So you have everything on premises. You pretty much want to take it all, move it to cloud. You may want to take a more incremental step. You may want to start with, I'm just going to use cloud storage. This one is actually a pretty easy one to do, especially with the offerings that we provide, since you can just provision storage and start storing things into the cloud. The other model that we see is that people want to keep their data on premises for various reasons. Governance types of reasons are often come into play in data residency. And so instead of moving the data to the cloud, they may want to move applications to the cloud. So those are common patterns. And I want to go through 3 examples that we've done. And Eric has been heavily involved in these. And so he's a great resource here to ask any of your questions. But I'll give a high-level overview. So this first is a top life insurance provider in the US, and they have gone live. Actually, this says first 2 phases. They just completed their 3rd, so this is a little bit out of date. But they had a multi-phase migration to IBM's content services on cloud. And so this is IBM's cloud SaaS offering that runs in IBM Cloud. And the drivers, the reason this insurer wanted to move to cloud is they were supporting 3 separate legacy content applications. And they had, one of those was in a leased data center that they needed to close. It already had a due date for closing. And so the challenges with this particular migration, and you'll see these are common patterns, but they had many different business applications that use the content. So it's integrated across their enterprise. They had a medium number of users, pretty good number. That's not a huge number, but about 650 plus users. And then they also had to move data from 3 different locations. So they were migrating from, 3 different types of repositories into, IBM content services. And so some of the process and the innovations that were used for this is, clearly a phased go live approach was really required. And later on, we'll get into some best practices there. They also made use of some tools. One is called a real-time viewer, and one is called mimic mode, that allow you at the highest level just to start your migration where your data is still not migrated yet, but you've moved your applications into the cloud, and the data can be retrieved from either location. So as you can imagine, moving a lot of content, and these are all, very large corpuses of content that these examples were moving into cloud, can take time. And so with these tools, we really have a much better mechanism for a much better way to quickly get you to SaaS and have your users running the applications from SaaS. And so by consolidating to a single ECM system, they were able to modernize and saved an estimated like 5 million in the first year. So a lot of benefits to doing this migration. The second one I want to talk about is a top auto insurer, also in the US. They had used IBM's FileNet image services. So this is the product that was built, gosh, probably 35 years ago now. Runs very well, but has become expensive to maintain on premises. And they'd been storing claims in that system for 10 years plus. They wanted to consolidate on IBM's business automation content services on cloud, and as that was their strategic cloud content platform. They needed, in this case, one of their drivers is that they needed to get off of an on-prem storage system that they were using, which was increasing extensively in support cost. They had a mix of documents that were needed to be accessed very regularly, frequently. And then they had some that were more long-term that were accessed intermittently. But it was really important for this company to be able to maintain their business. In other words, people accessing these documents, it's a core part of their business. They had to be able to access these with the same performance and that they were able to do in their on-premises systems. And so what we did at this particular migration is there was extensive production readiness reviews. So again, all driven around this. This is core to our business. We cannot take a hit in processing times, right? And so there was a tremendous amount of upfront work done to ensure that we had all the right characteristics and had the right performance, and tested early on so that changes and updates could be made. And in fact, it was discovered as the project was proceeding that the way that it had originally been envisioned as provision we needed to update that. We needed to add some faster cloud storage. And so, you always have to be able to adopt to these kind of changes or these kind of things that you discover as you go along. And so we just were able to have an on-premises repository, we call those object stores, available to those customers for a short period of time until we got the correct type of storage provisioned. Another key aspect for this particular client was we used Instana, and this helped us really do more proactive monitoring and provided dashboards for the customer to be able to monitor their cloud storage. And so this, again, the key thing here was that they were successfully able to replace this on-prem system. And, in the end, they were able to meet their processing and performance goals, even though, it was a much different geographic distribution of the components, of the service. Now, the last one I want to talk about is I wanted to talk about this one because it was done 9 years ago. So, this isn't new. We've been doing these things for quite some time. And, this was what's called a fast moving consumer goods organization. So, think things like, shampoo and consumer goods. So this was a project to consolidate multiple ECM systems. And they really wanted to use IBM's managed services in order to augment and extend their IT resources, which were limited. This one also had a very large number of applications that were reliant on that content, and they could not tolerate any disruptions to ongoing work because it's business critical processes. They also use this RTV real-time viewer in mimic mode to be able to more quickly do their migration. And they were estimated at saving about 5 million in the first year, and then 2 to 3 million years after. So as they're able to retire their old systems over time, as the data is all migrated, there are continued savings into the future. Okay, so that's some examples, and what we've got here, and again, Eric lives this every day, so please ask your questions. But we have put this together as 7 steps to the cloud, and so the first thing is, when you're preparing to do this, you really do need to review your current state, right? You need to ask the type of questions. How many ECM systems do I have? How many other systems that may hold documents or file systems, or file shares or cloud object shares do I need to move into the system? You should also, especially if you're consolidating multiple ECM systems, you should look at your taxonomy. Oftentimes, this is a great opportunity to rationalize your taxonomy. What type of documents you have, what metadata do you need on those documents? And then finally, it's also very important to think about, do I need to migrate all these documents? In many cases, you can prune and get rid of documents that you really are no longer required for your business. So one of the next really key steps is to select a migration partner. Most of our customers, they don't do this regularly. This is kind of a one-time event, or maybe a long process or multi-phase, but it's typically a one-time event. So you really should look for partners who have experience. They understand the tools that are useful when you're doing migrations, have expertise with those tools, as well as understand the source and the target systems that you're moving from. As again, frequently you're consolidating different platforms. Selecting a cloud provider, that's another key step. You need to, whether it be you're managing it yourself in the cloud, you're selecting a SaaS provider, you need to ask all the questions about, well, what's your HA, high availability? What's your DR, disaster recovery? Do you have data residency requirements? Does that service provide or meet those data residency requirements? What about compliance certifications? Things like SOC 2. What monitoring tools do they have for you to understand how the service is being used? And is there an ability to have spikes in your processing needs? A lot of people have needs at certain quarters or end of the year when they're going to be processing a lot more information. And is that kind of thing available to you with your cloud provider? Step 4 is all around preparing for migration. So, you create a rollout plan, you prepare for the unexpected, you make sure you have a risk plan. It's very important to also set realistic timelines, based upon what you know now. And probably most importantly, or very importantly, you should do a pilot, right? So you should go test out, okay, I'm moving these things from here to here. Let's pick a subset, because this will give you the real data, right? How long does it take to move these documents? What problems occurred when you did it? So again, another key step. Then you begin your migrations. You know that because these are often customized systems, or sometimes they're not even vendors you're moving from. It may be your own homegrown systems, but you need to make sure to watch your deadlines, reprioritize as needed. And then post-migration, it's important to test. You need to make sure you've done regression testing, performance testing. It's really critical to get your users in the mix, to also do user acceptance testing, especially if you have changes in your application that are going to show up for those users. And even if you don't have changes, is the performance acceptable? And then also very important is auditing and reconciliation. Did I actually move all the documents from system A to system B? How do you make sure that that happened? And then finally, ongoing. So this is where you make sure you're monitoring everything that's happening in the system. If you have ongoing migration continuing to happen, which is very common, you monitor that as well. And then, you plan for your next phase and kind of repeat these last steps. All right, so that's that focus there was really on SaaS, because those customer examples were all managed cloud services that we provide. I wanted to just spend a little bit of time on what it means to navigate, or just some tips and things to think about if you want to move to cloud, but you want to manage the service. Or, again, you probably will be doing this to some extent, because most customers have a hybrid situation. You may be using some SaaS, and you may be doing some of your own applications there that you're managing and installing yourself. So a couple of points about, what does it mean to move to cloud? Some key things to think about are that oftentimes, you're taking a system that's been on premises for, in many cases, many years, 10, 15, 20 years in some cases. And knowing that, your on-prem management, your engineers may often play it safe by over provisioning the systems. And it's not really that they're playing it safe, it's that that's what was needed on premises, because you don't want to do this like every year. You don't want to do, you want to make sure that you're planning for capacity that's, 2 or 3 years down the line. And in general, it may not cost that much to just buy a server, right? It's a capital expense. But when you're doing it with the cloud, you really need to make sure you're not over provisioning either, over provisioning any of your cloud resources, be that compute, storage, because you can always add more, right? And so that's just something to look out for. Cloud providers do charge you for what they provision, not for what you use. I mean, there are some exceptions to this if you have SaaS type services that charge based upon, number of things you run through the system. But in most cases, especially when you're provisioning hardware and such, it's gonna be based upon what's provisioned. The other thing to think about is your cloud bill is often very hard to understand. It's very granular, often hundreds of line items for a single application that you may have deployed into the cloud based upon all the different services that you're using. And then those services also often have millions of different SKUs and pricing models that change all the time, right? So that's another thing to think about, is to making sure, how do I make sure I'm getting the most for my money? And so if you broke those into 3 areas, you have challenges around consumption, don't want to pay for unused resources. You don't want to also allocate like the wrong storage type. You have really fast storage, but you really don't need fast storage. You don't want to do that because you're overpaying. Pricing model, not leveraging reservation-based discounts is a key thing. You may not even know about a lot of these discounts. And then finally, governance. How do you actually know who is consuming what services? You have this big long bill. It's not always easy to map that to what applications and who is actually using it. So that's things to be aware of, and some strategies for dealing with these are, just remembering that every workload is different, and you do need to go select the right resource type for that workload. So some services may need to be optimized for memory, some may need more storage, some may need more compute power. And this second point goes to what I've been mentioning all along, is like the more you can choose managed services over do-it-yourself approaches where you're installing and managing the cloud, the more you can, get a lot of the capabilities in one price point and in a simpler package rather than all the underlying individual services. Next, knowing who is using what. You have to set up centralized, governance to provide some visibility into that. Also knowing that, most workloads are pretty predictable. You just have to measure them. And you can take advantage of discounted pricing that is offered in many of these cloud environments. One example here, so that if you reserve instances, you might get up to a 70% discount. But if you use this spot pricing where you can just use resources if they become available for certain of your workloads that might be appropriate, you can get, much higher discounting, often up to like 90%. And then just knowing that, cloud cost optimization is complex. You really need tooling to help you manage these services. Okay, well, that's really what I wanted to cover today. This is just a couple of call to actions that you can take. We do have migration assessment workshops. This is where we look at what you actually need to do and can give you an assessment of what it will take to do your migration. And then we've also recently made our content services available on AWS. It has free trials, very simple and easy to provision. So we encourage you to go take a look at that as well. So I'm going to stop sharing now.
All right, very good. Thank you so much, Lauren. That is Lauren Mays with IBM, Program Director for Content and Capture. If you have a question for Lauren today, now would be the time to enter that into the Q&A feature. We will have some time here for questions here before we end our session today. Now, Lauren, you mentioned in your life insurance example, for example, you mentioned some tools, real-time viewer and mimic mode that streamline the migration process. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they work to accelerate migration?
Yeah, I'd like to hand that one over to Eric. He is the expert in these tools.
Sure. Yeah, these are pretty unique offerings that were actually requested by customers. So I'm going to be honest, actually, I'm a former customer myself. I'm probably a veteran of 100 plus content migrations. And the fact is, most customers don't leave us enough time to migrate all the content before they want to go live, or before they have an event such as a data center closure, or they want to eliminate the license fees for a legacy application. That's just a fact. So customers came to us and said, look, we want to be able to cut over earlier so we can get the benefits of the IBM software more quickly, and as well as the related products, RPA and AI and things, all the benefits that a cloud migration might provide. However, we know we've got petabytes of data in some cases. It's going to take us a long time to migrate. So we came up with the option of we call real-time viewer. And in essence, what it does, it allows us to, as long as we have data extracted from the source system, it allows us to cut those users over to, let's say, FileNet, for instance, in the cloud. And even though the migration is not technically complete, so we might still be loading data to FileNet, in between, there's a web service, if you will, and a database that tracks, has that data been loaded yet to FileNet, or has that data just been extracted and not yet loaded? And it's all black box to the user. So what the benefit of that is one of the use cases I give customers, or one of the advice I give customers, is you always have to expect the unexpected, right? Migrations are a puzzle, right? And there's so many unexpected things that can happen, which means it's very difficult to actually select your end date or select your cutover date. It's almost impossible to say select an end date, because I don't know all the issues you're going to resolve. So what this real-time viewer tool does, it allows you to actually pick that end date. And Lauren and I just finished a very large migration. In fact, was one of the use cases where the customer said, I have to close my data center by June 30th. Well, we enabled that. Even though the migration isn't done, the migration might continue for another 6 months. But we were able to allow the customer to exit that data center, saving about $5 million annually, and let the migration continue. The users came live on the FileNet software, and nobody was the wiser. Users didn't know if the content had been loaded to FileNet or not. So that's one of the enhanced tools that we have available to users. Again, that's just by experience, right? This grew out of, hey, customers coming to me and saying, I can't migrate this quickly enough. So that's what we did.
All right. Very good. I do want to get to our questions here from our audience today. Sure. If you have questions for Lauren and Eric, now would be the time to enter them into the Q&A feature. We've had a couple of questions come by, folks, about security. And indeed, it's a good question because it was disclosed just this week, for example, that the US State Department, for example, was hacked, apparently by Chinese hackers. China-based hackers, I should say, who had access to their systems since apparently March. So it's stories like this that make organizations somewhat hesitant to let their content go outside. What are the security measures at IBM on Cloud SaaS that you offer?
Yeah, I can take this one. So it's, there's a variety of security measures at many levels. Right. And so, we have things like compliance certifications, things like SOC 2, ISO standards. This can help ensure that, we're meeting kind of the core-based security requirements from a compliance perspective. There's HIPAA compliance requirements. We also have that as well. The other thing that we have is things are secured in layers. We have content is always encrypted in both at rest and where it's stored. Every object within your system, all the entire object is authorized, right? So only the users who have access will be able to access that data. All the documents and folders and all the entities within that are also secured. Your DevOps people don't have access. Our DevOps, I should say, don't have access to that information. So it's really at multiple levels that we provide security, and also we do frequent patches. So we follow a PCERT security process where any vulnerable software, depending upon the severity of the vulnerability, we analyze it to determine if we're impacted by that vulnerability, and we update, we apply defect fixes to address those vulnerabilities.
Okay. All right. This question coming in from Wosley. Thank you, Wosley, for your question today. Wosley's asking, how do you choose which systems or processes to move first to the cloud? Are there any tools to determine that priority?
Anything you want to bring up there, Eric?
Yeah, so We have tools that get into the details of what is going to be. I'm often surprised is how little customers know about their data. So we have tools. Watson Analytics is one, right, where we use the describe feature of Watson Analytics. We're able to get into the database and help the customer summarize and understand the data, the data types, the data size, etc., the application dependencies. That's one actually that trips up a lot of customers, is not only knowing what data I have to migrate, but what are the applications that depend on that data. Nowadays, I would say, and again, I've been doing this 25 plus years, the data migration itself, we're kind of old hand at that, and customers, there's a greater understanding of customers of the data portion of it. What's tripping customers up is that application dependencies. So Lauren, you mentioned a workshop, right? There's no shortcut to it, right? It's engage the right people. IBM, the lab services team, engage us to help you go through those usage patterns, right, and understand all those things. And we've got questionnaires, we've got a full process through that workshop that leads a customer through just that question, what to do when. I would also say, be agile, right? I've seen way too many customers that try to do everything at once. Pick the business units where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck and do it in an agile fashion. Not unlike application development. With migrations, I say fail fast, right? And I don't mean fail, but I mean, if you're going to find issues with migrations, when you will find issues in migrations, do that quickly. And that means break up your data into smaller pieces and do it via business groups or move groups.
All right. Another question coming in from our audience today. We rely on M365. Is there a reason to favor Azure over AWS for cloud storage?
I think it's very dependent on what you're trying to do. If all of your documents are stored in Microsoft Cloud and you're primarily, retrieving and accessing those documents, then perhaps it is a good idea to use Azure. Having said that, we absolutely have customers who standardize on IBM Cloud or AWS, and also have documents that they may just use Microsoft. A very common way that customers use our software with Microsoft 365 is MS 365 may be where they have users who are kind of editing documents on the fly, but then when it's time to manage those as corporate records, or as things that you want to make sure you save and retain and delete and all that stuff, according to your particular regulations, they move those into the IBM system. And so then you're really just dealing with the documents wherever, they're stored, either in IBM Cloud or AWS.
All right. Very good. We have been speaking with Lauren Mays, Program Director for Content and Capture for IBM Business Automation Software. Joining Lauren has been Eric Leeson, Worldwide Practice Leader for Business Automation for IBM Technology Expert Labs. Lauren and Eric, thank you so much for being with us today and being a vital part of the continuing discussion here at AIIM about intelligent information management. Your comments and perspective were spot on. We really want to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, with that, I'd like to pass it back over to Nina to tell us a bit more about what's coming up for AIIM. Nina?
Absolutely, Kevin. We have an exciting mega webinar coming up in the next couple of weeks. So as you know, artificial intelligence has been around for some time, and yet it often felt like it's not something that is needed, or it's an IT issue to deal with. Well, not anymore. In the last few months, generative AI has exploded thanks to the launch of ChatGPT. So join us on July 26th with a lineup of industry experts as we discuss and explore the impact AI has and will continue to have on information management. Remember, you don't need to worry about what AI is, but you do need to understand what it does and what it can do. So click the link in our chat to register today. As we bring this webinar to a close, a few last minute reminders. We've recorded this webinar, so you can catch anything you want to hear again in a recap email that will be sent within 24 hours. A link to the resources for this webinar has been put in the chat. You'll find a copy of this presentation as well as additional resources through that link. Also, don't forget to take our feedback survey and let us know how we did. Now, before we wrap up, I'd like to ask Lauren if she has any last minute key takeaways for our audience.
I guess my main thing is that it may all seem very complex and there are a lot of steps and things you need to think about, but the benefits are really there. We have seen significant cost reductions for our clients. And so that's my main point I wanted to kind of wrap up with.
Absolutely. And what about you, Eric? Any last key takeaways for our audience?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the concept of lift and shift, right? I used to be in the camp of just pick up what you have and move it over. And honestly, I've shifted over the years, and especially recently. So we've got a number of customers who are on this digital transformation journey, right? And if all you do is lift up your content, move it as is, I don't think you get the benefit of, I mentioned, machine learning and AI and robotic process automation. Those are things that we can help you with, not only moving the content, but looking at how you're going to use the content, right? So while lift and shift is certainly an option, I would say take a broader look at how that data is going to be used down the road and try to take advantage of some of the evolving technologies that are available to you.
Wonderful. And what about you, Kevin?
Well, it's clear that everybody's moving to the cloud for all the reasons that Lauren mentioned, if not just because of a mandate from above, but how do you know what to do and when to do it? How do you determine what's cloud ready and what should stay? How do you really ensure that you get all the benefits from cloud management, content management in the cloud? And today has been a great discussion exploring that with some real world case studies. So I really appreciate IBM being here and presenting that perspective as we continue these really important discussions about how we should be moving forward with content in the next few years. So thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure to be part of it.
Absolutely. A big thank you to our sponsor, IBM, for a wonderful, informative webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And this is Nina from AIIM saying, see you next time. Take care,
Bye, everyone.
everyone.